Hey everyone, it's Barney the Dinosaur, one of the hosts of Talking Tunes with Toys here. I'm really excited for you to listen into this episode of the podcast. The guest we brought on was really cool, and it was a really interesting show that she brought in that we got to talk about. Before we dive into it, I just want to give a little bit of a warning up top. The show that that our guest brought on, um, we dive into some topics that might be a little bit triggering and or a little bit disturbing to some people who might be listening in, and it has nothing to do with the guest or the show. It was just something that we kind of had to touch on just due to what the show is trying to say as like a theme, or like a concept or something like that. And the whole point of this podcast is to talk about niche and obscure animation that the guest really feels passionate about. That dives into um, stuff that normally mainstream animation probably wouldn't do. Um, well, I guess point of the matter is, and we just briefly mentioned, and well, yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. We talk about some topics that might be a little bit jarring to some people due to the nature of the show. We dive into a little bit about uh, yeah, uh, child harassment and suicidal thoughts, and moral quandaries that involve things like corruption and really like big like moral standards, and the one thing that we do on this podcast is we like to have a safe place where the guest has who feels passionate about the show that they bring in, and that they feel passionate about the stuff that they talk about, even if the topics might be a little bit triggering to some people. So if any of this stuff that I mentioned might be, a little jarring, or might be problematic to some people, I recommend not listening to this podcast or skipping over the bits where we talk about things like suicide and child endangerment and harassment and stuff of that nature. Again, and this is a safe space where we try to encourage all the guests as to talk about the shows that they enjoy, right, and dive into the stuff that we really feel like deserves to be mentioned, and when it comes to cartoons, because that's what cartoons really are. They're they should be able to explore all kinds of various areas and surroundings, and as that normal people might not think about. Uh, but either way, I, despite that we understand that there might be some issues that people may not be currently like ready for, or like things that might be uncomfortable to some people. So yeah, just give you a warning up top. There's gonna be some topics that we touch on a bit, and we're not trying to like sugarcoat it or like try to downgrade it or anything. We know that there are serious issues, because we're just trying to try to get a flow in the conversation, actually, because it's something that we felt had to be mentioned. But again, if at any point, and if this might be triggering to some listeners of the podcast, I recommend either not listening to this episode or skipping over the bits and maybe go into another episode, because the last thing we want is to have people that might feel uncomfortable about the stuff that we're trying to talk about on this podcast. And so again, just a little warning up top, uh, and we love you guys, and we just hope you enjoy this episode of Talking Tunes with Toys. Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of Talking Tunes with Toys, the podcast where we discuss niche and obscure animation from not just the Western Hemisphere, but animation from all over the world. That's what we like to do: discuss animation from not just here in the U.S., but all around the world. I'm your host, Barney the Dinosaur, along with my correspondents, SpongeBob and SponBalloon SquarePants. Bonjour, chérie. On What are you guys doing? Well, you said animation from all over the world. We're just showing a little bit of cultural presence. Yeah, but you both just said French. I'm saying we can't be inclusive. Yeah, okay, hold on. Hey, wait a minute. A minute. So you pretty much just said hi in French. I think in both ways. Again, no one said we had to be exclusive. Hmm. Okay, but your $10 right now that you can't say, and that you can't say anything French besides hello there. Oh yeah, I'll take that bet. Le monde it uh was in Frabjaka. Dormez-vous. Sonnez le patine. Ding dang dong. Uh, let's just move on now. And that, folks, is how I win. But yeah, so we are the trio from the show Adventures of the Trio on YouTube. Of course, you might also know us from Barney and Friends and SpongeBob SquarePants. But like I said, this podcast is talking about all kinds of animation from everywhere. Because while there's a lot of niche Western animation, and there's even more niche animation from all over the world, especially in Japan. And so we are glad to talk about any kind of animation and from any part of the world, especially when it comes to Japanese animation, because that is a hotbed and of niche and obscure animation in a very different sense. So we're excited to talk about that, and we're excited to talk about it with our guest, who I would say is a very big lover of this type of animation. She has worked as a social media intern for Desmore Designs, an online personal shopper for Walmart, a patent access specialist for Lee Health, and a certified life and health insurance program professional for the National Insurer Producer Registry. Whew, that's a lot of titles. But above all else, she is an animation enthusiast and an artist in her blood and bones. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Priscilla Segarra, everyone!
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Hello, Barney. Hello, SpongeBob.
A pleasure, Priscilla. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you already know the SpongeBob's. I don't know if you know. You know me, Barney the Dinosaur from Barney and Friends.
Yes, yes, I do. I love your work.
Oh, why, thank you. Hmm. Thank you, Priscilla. Hello, very honored. No, no, you stay out of this. You talk about me. It's my moment. You guys stay out of this. Anywho, we're delighted to have you here to talk about animation and cartoons and all things art and niche and obscure in general. Before we get into it, I'm just curious to know because obviously you're an animator, but I just want to know what are the types of cartoons or animation that you think really gravitated to that you really gravitated towards, or that helped propel you into this idealistic career, and what were the types of cartoons or like genre of cartoons that say really influenced you?
I would say a lot of different stuff. I like different types of animations, from like comedies to like more serious tones. I especially love the ones where like they challenge different types of morality and also spiritual and superstitions explorations.
Yeah. Experiences, expectations, and yeah, in that realm. Yeah, well, I love that, and I think that definitely points to something in this show that you decided, because this show that we're talking about, woo, this one really took us. This one really took us to task, because today we are talking about a Japanese animation called Hell Girl, a supernatural fantasy anime and that really challenges, as you know, this idea of morality and really takes the idea of supernatural and fantasy to another level, I might say. Priscilla, I'm curious, as when you hear the words like supernatural or like fantasy or whatever, what do you come to expect with something like that?
With supernatural, I tend to think of like things that are like around like the dark aspects of like superstition, especially involving like the afterlife and all ghosts and spirits. Fantasy, I feel, is also a bit more tied to like mythology and other worlds and realms.
Yeah, I would say that Hellgirl definitely features that because yeah, if anyone just heard what I said, and we're talking, and it's a show called Hellgirl, yeah, it focuses a little on the little taboo word known as hell. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to talk about with a concept like that and the concept of hell in general. Uh,
Yes, there's a lot to talk about that. Yeah. So a lot of it is very inspired by, of course, by the Japanese mythology and along with like their belief in Shintoism. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so for those who don't know, Hellgirl is it's an episodic anime
Well,
series.
hold on. We're actually gonna touch on that. So yeah, before we start talking about all that, because it's certainly a lot to talk about with the show. We're just gonna give a little brief synopsis on Hell Girl. Spun Balloon is gonna give us a little brief synopsis for the people that may not be familiar with a show like this in a segment called Brief Bob. With the rise of shows like Hazbin Hotel and Jujutsu Kaisen, there seems to be a growing popularity in animation dealing with the occult and actually openly displaying hell as a backdrop and a concept. While Western animation has had some stints in the focus of the underworld and the dark arts, Japanese anime has openly embraced that side of the culture since the beginning. Hellgirl is a supernatural dark fantasy anime that began in 2005 that focuses on the titular character Hellgirl, or Jigoru Sojo, also going by the name of AI Emna, who, along with her group of followers, carry out her duty of striking contracts with people who desire their hated enemies to be dragged and damn their souls to hell. The series has 3 seasons from 2005 to 2009, with the second season being referred to as Hellgirl Two Mirrors, the third season called Hellgirl Three Vessels, and a fourth season made in 2017, broken into 2 parts titled For Twilight and Reminiscent. However, the first 3 seasons were eventually dropped from streaming due to a licensing agreement, but the fourth season is currently streaming thanks to a new agreement with Amazon and Crunchyroll. So that, in essence, is Hellgirl. Back to the episode. All that remains is for you to decide. That actually brings up a very good point. And Priscilla, have you seen like a rise in like shows that deal with like the occult and like this idea of hell and all? Because and things like Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss, and things like that. Have you seen in like a growing like uptick in like this sort of occult fascination?
Oh yeah, I have seen a rise in that along with like what hell is and different like aspects of what morality could be or what, and also like also teasing on other aspects of like some like religious aspects for some shows, especially the indie ones.
Why do you suppose that is?
Hmm. Well, in my opinion, I think it could be like a bit of an opening because I know some people have stated to have gone through like religious trauma, especially in the Western Hemisphere, where it feels like that they were forced into these beliefs, but they weren't really understood as to what was behind it all. So it leads to a lot of big confusion to a generation.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting inquiry, and that leads straight into what Hellgirl pretty much represents. So that leads me to the question: why is this show your guilty pleasure?
This show was my guilty pleasure. Well, it came out like in the early 2000s when I was very young, and It left an impression on me where it was about trying to seek revenge on those who have done wrong to you, or you feel like that nothing is going on to get your justice.
Mhm.
And I feel like, especially for a younger generation, it can feel that way, where it feels like it feels like that you're not, everyone is, people who are doing you wrong are getting away with it. They're not getting their just desserts. And what I like about it is that it kind of tests those grounds where Hellgirl, you think she's evil, but she's more of a neutral type of character where she just gives you a choice to make the contract. She doesn't force you. And
Mhm.
it kind of just pushes to limits what pushes this person to limit to make them to go on with this. And then you do see at the end that a lot of times they're not very satisfied with the revenge.
Yeah, this is an interesting quarry that I truly never thought we would discuss on this particular podcast. And see, there's a big how do I say this? There's definitely a large philosophical quarry when trying to justify the idea of justice and revenge, at least in a more moral state. Like we were trying to find well, because you mentioned that the I mentioned that a lot of anime focuses a lot on like religion and cultural beliefs. So we were trying to find and any religion, and especially the one that you mentioned, which was the
Yes, Shintoism.
Shintoism. Right. Which was kind of the focus of which is kind of the focal point of Hellgirl. So we were trying to find and how they justified the idea of revenge, and honestly, in any religion, and the one thing that I think religion and can unanimously agree on is no real tangible justification for revenge, and as a concept, in any religion, honestly, because quoted, and revenge is an untamed and animalistic bitter desire to injure another in return for a wrong done and to oneself or loved ones is an unrefined characteristic seen across nature. In humanity, it tends to create an undying cycle of violence and retribution, just as can be seen in long-term conflict zones around the world. Um, and religion tries to skirt away from that and try to adapt a a better behavior, because it's trying to skirt away from that kind of teaching. But Priscilla, I'm curious, how would you like justify the idea of justice and revenge?
All right, for justice, I would say the difference between justice and revenge is that justice is less self-serving and more serving to others. Revenge, you're just trying to get back towards your own needs.
Right. And I
And
think
that's what it's all is in Hellgirl. Everything is just self-serving, which leads to like human misplaced judgment.
yeah, because it comes with the price. Because just for the uninitiated, Hell Girl kind of has a bargain system, where this just goes the idea of never make deals with the devil. Because the deal is, at least in Hell Girl, is that she offers you the opportunity to banish your most hated enemy to hell in exchange for your own soul eventually going to hell. And they try to sugarcoat it by saying, when you die, you go to hell, but that's not until you die, blah blah blah. It doesn't make it better. It honestly doesn't make it better.
It doesn't. There's even an episode of someone who has done it and they're at the verge of dying, and it still feels like an empty road to live, knowing where your destination already is. And it also is a part of Shintoism where it's not really like you get judged and go to hell. Either you get guided by spirits and you either end up in heaven or hell.
Yeah, that is one. Yeah, that is one of the fascinating pieces as that I discovered, and actually, this is a thing that I've noticed in a lot of anime, particularly Japanese animation, is it can be very referential to the culture rather than Western animation, which focuses more on like technology and modernity and stuff like this. But there's something about Japanese that really that really focuses more on like the history, the mythology, and the legacy and the culture that is really like embedded in like the Japanese is um, like the Japanese like folklore and belief, and it's definitely a different vibe in Western animation. Animation which focuses more on trends and technology and modernity, as I just said. And do you see that sort of difference in anime, Priscilla?
Yes, I do see a difference. I would say like for like America, I think the main reason why is because we're more of a mixed culture country. We're like a melting pot of different like beliefs and different people from different places. And where with Japan, they're more very integrated to their culture and along with like their religion, along with their idea of having like honor and also showing respect to where they came from.
Yeah, leading to the next question I have, because obviously features a lot of that and a lot and we mentioned the idea of morality and things like that. But what are some of the lesser known quality bits that you think are the reason that Hellgirl isn't as popular as it should be?
I would say like one of the reasons it could be because compared to like other animation style, it is very less flashy. It has more neutral tones to it, and which kind of like contrasts to like Hellgirl's tone, which is like black and red,
Hmm.
where all the characters are more like an earthly, more realistic shading.
I mean, that is true, and that is true. But I mean, if you think, but I mean, and color contrast aside, we're talking about hell, which is pretty much all that contrasting color of like red, orange, and all that. Again, if you look at things like Hell of a Boss or Hazbin Hotel, that's pretty much the base color line for all of that.
Yeah, it is a very extravagant, flashy color that Hell of a Boss and a lot of other shows like the Amazing Digital Circle. It's a very flashy colors and a very like pop out characters where they keep things more of a neutral state for the Hellgirl with the character designs and everything, and even like make it so like when the Hellgirl is investigating the person that's trying to get in contact with her, it looks like she's just blending in with everyone.
Do you think that helps give a more like realistic tone, like to the style of the show?
I think it also makes it realistic, but also makes it feel eerie that a spirit could be around you, but you wouldn't even notice because of how well they can blend in.
Yeah, yeah. Which definitely goes back to the idea of like spirits and all that. Which we would love to talk about that. To talk about that, but that's a whole another podcast. That's a whole another hour of this stuff to talk about. And I think another thing, then that at least for what we saw, is there are times where it can get as working the pacing can get a little slow. Um, like like when you're just talking about the episodes throughout the seasons, and then there are some times where times where the pacing can be a little bit slow and a little bit like formulaic, in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. So one of the things that could easily put someone like drawn away from the show would be like each episode it feels like it's a different story with different characters most of the time, and sometimes it doesn't start having like a cons- a c- a consistency is like later on in the season. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it could like withdraw attachment for like a lot of other fans, especially like newer fans trying to get into it, who have like seen like other recent shows.
And that is the cold hard truth about any kind of show made nowadays, especially animation. That it needs to hook the viewers in early.
Yes, it always gotta have to be hooked in early. With Helgo, it's kind of like a bit of a slow burn. It first takes a while as they just make you try to understand like what's going on, what she does, and and a bit of the type of people that would actually like take on these contracts.
That actually brings me to the next question. What are some of the pros that makes this show worth watching?
What I do love about it, it does have like a great soundtrack, especially with the openings and ending songs. They're very like enticing, and also it's also like also have like a solemn bit to them. And also the music is really great with the storyline because it can make you feel like you're kind of understanding the person that's doing the contracts mentality, like the eeriness, and also it feels like that they're going to snap just through the music alone. And like they're like already being pushed towards the edge with everything.
Yeah, if there's one thing that we have learned from doing this podcast is that music will sell. The show. The concept of the show, the emotionality of the show, the tone of the show. Like music helps elevate anything, really.
Yeah, and I also do love some of the art style, especially with like even like the cover art for Hellgirl and along with like the animations like done for like the ending and openings. It really shows like a beautiful aesthetic, especially like a montage to like older traditional Japanese art.
Yeah, and again, and it's going back to what I that's what I asked about. Asked about that stuff, that artistic style and tone, giving it a more realistic tone. I think that definitely does help ground the show, even if it's not as like fantastical or whatever, compared to all those other shows in Western animation that focuses on hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And piggybacking off of that, I think another pro, at least from what we saw, is what we've been talking about this idea of morality, because there's a lot of different scenarios in the show, where it's hard to tell like what is considered like good and what is considered bad, at least on a moral level. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah, so a lot of things it's not really good or bad can be like placed on like the misjudgment of persons, or maybe there was like a terrible bad circumstances that just led to these resentments, or it can even be like both are in the wrong.
And Enma is definitely at the crux of all of that, and even she has like a moral quandary. Like even she has a moral quandary in at least some of the episodes that we saw. And in television, there's this idea of like the protagonist needs to be like sort of a hero, or at least have like redeeming qualities about himself. True, but there's also the idea of an anti-hero, which pretty much dissolves all of that. I'm curious, Priscilla, when in your the best definition you could think of what do you think makes like a hero or an anti-hero when dealing with like the protagonist of a show? And do you think Emna, aka Hellgirl, falls under that spectrum, if at all?
Um, I'll say usually people would place as a hero as someone that usually like is trying to like they're trying to reach the conclusion, usually trying to solve the conflict, and usually it's done through like more like heroic means and principles. They usually have these strong principles that they want other people to follow as well or to represent. As where anti-hero, usually they'll even go through like these moralistic gray means, or they just hold little principles as long as they get like the resolution to the story.
Yeah, and does Hellgirl fall in either one of those categories if it's even possible?
And that's what I also find interesting about I Emma is that she's neither of those because she's not trying to reach a goal. When you learn more about her story, it's more like even her job is like a punishment for itself because she sought revenge as a spirit as well and was forced to take on this role.
Yeah. When you hear a little bit of the backstory of how she became Helga, you see, hey, she is kind of more of a villain, not really like a villain, more like someone who's trying to seek retribution for her own and for the trouble that she faced, as rather than trying to avenge and anything.
Yeah, I could see how people would see her as a hero. I feel like she's like a tragic character stuck in the cycle of revenge. And like so it's kind of like a bit of a reflection where her job is a reflection of what she's done. And she's stuck having to see all the cruelty that people will go to get their just desserts.
Which leads to the next thing I want to ask: is there a particular episode or an arc that you can point to when trying to convince people to watch this show? What would you say is the selling point, right? That you point to try to convince people that this is a good show to watch.
I would say the first episode does give like a good introduction. I would say when things start to like change a bit would also be believe it's the third or fourth episode where you see this where it's about a girl who is like very bratty and tries to deceive people to get what she wants. And then she tries to send her she tries to send her foster mother help, but then it is too late because someone else that she did wrong decides to send her to hell instead. So her contract becomes invalid.
Yeah, it goes back. Yeah, it goes back to the morality. That's another thing. I think you can. Then the thing that Helga is pretty much it's very good at is really seeing like the actual inner soul of a person, and to really sense how morally unjust or just they really are. Who are they really inside, besides making this little making this who are they really inside, that is that pretty much damns their souls to hell already. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do like one episode in season two where a guy does try to seek Hellgirl help to help a girl that is his crush because she's dating a guy that's basically hurts her, and he tells Hellgirl to save her, and rejects him, tells him I'm not a heroine.
Yeah,
And
this
then it takes a turn where you find out that the girl he likes did the contract with Hellgirl to send that boy to hell that he wanted to do.
yeah
And it
it's
becomes like a very moralistic state of mind because he seeks Hellgirl to get help and she tells him that she's not a hero of justice. And then you see this person that he cares so much about is already being state sent. It's going to already be determined to go to hell no matter what she does in life. She'll always be sent to hell. And he realizes what she meant by that.
yeah. It's a fascinating journey. It's a very fascinating journey. Now hold on, I want to point out here, Priscilla. I feel like you're sugarcoating it. You feel like you're sugarcoating the hook a bit, because you're forgetting the fact that while the concept yeah, it's dark, but I don't think people really understand like how dark this show can get. Yeah, you mentioned that first episode, and again, again, this might be a little triggering to some people. Some people will try not to sugarcoat anything. And then, but that first episode, it features like a classic like story, a classic like storyline, or like a girl is getting bullied by the popular girls in her school, and she's dealing with and she's doing it really hardly. She can't tell her parents about it, anything like that. That I'm not saying that that's not like a serious issue. But I'm saying, I know we're kind of used to that in a lot of storytelling or it's on medias. But then you move forward to the second episode, which takes like hard like full throttle notion, and they're dealing with topics like such as sexual harassment, kidnapping, and predatory actions to a child. Uh, that is when you're like, oh no, it's not just assumed that it can go that dark. It can go that dark. Was that something that you clocked with watching this show? did the show, Priscilla, or did or did it catch you off guard the first time you watched it, or was it just something and that you kind of anticipated immediately, just from watching anime?
Yeah, when I first watched it, I was very young, and so I didn't anticipate any of that, and it did scare me a bit because it did bring like these real life, like dark situations that people can get through, especially the second episode where it goes into a girl who's being stalked, and it's like driving her insane.
Stalked and
And
almost
then,
molested.
yeah, she was stalked, and then she ended up getting kidnapped, and that's when she decided to pull the string.
Which again, piggybacking off the idea of justice and revenge, and like how on earth are you able to quantify something like that? In the idea of revenge and justice. I was like a kid is in serious trouble. Well, I think that's pretty obvious where that lies. You know.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, there are situations where you see in the show where a person's in a desperate situation. They feel like they have no choice because they feel like that it's going to be a terrible result, or they're going to be their life is literally endangered. It feels like that's their only chance because things are going on in their society is not really aiding them, as well as you see with the girl, because the police aren't really helping. You find out that even the detective was the person stalking her.
Yeah, and that adds an even more layer or layer of like I would say like realism. Maybe not. I mean not realism because now it's dealing with like crooked justice system, which is even greater injustice. Honestly.
Yes, it is. Yes. And yeah, the second episode really brings like a very scary light as to who else would do these, because usually you just say a girl first episode you see a girl who is a victim of bullying and she feels like that she's being pushed to the edge due to it because she's even stealing money for her family to pay this bully. And
Mhm.
then she's also ruining her chances to get into a good high school, which is very important for people in Japan, especially when they want to get a higher education to college.
Yeah, and again, not saying that it's not as serious as child
I
endangerment.
mean, yeah, it wasn't life endangerment, but it does feel like, for especially for someone her age, it feels like it's the end of the road.
I mean, she was close to committing suicide at one point.
Yes, which is very serious of how, like, especially young people, how they're how especially when they're still in development, how easy it is for them to feel pushed to the edge with all the stresses and everything. And there is a high suicide rate in Japan.
hmm Yeah, and I think the beauty of Hellgirl is it doesn't just transit it doesn't just mean and just only mean children. Like it transcends like every age. It's like sure like children deal with this, teens deal with this, and even adults deal with this like moral tantrum of like what is there left but to just pull the red string, you know?
Yes, yeah. So it does show like a feeling of helplessness to a lot of the people who make these contracts. And sometimes you feel like what would I do? And you don't know. You can't really think of what else could I do. You find these like dead end situations for them.
Yeah, which leads to is the next question I have. If you had creative control over the show Hell Girl, what would you do with it? Would you continue it? Would you revise it? Would you reboot it? Whatever. What would you do if you had the power of control over this show?
I would say if I wouldn't continue this series, I would try to do a reboot of it because this currently has like 4 seasons and there has been like little low ratings for the last couple seasons because it's a bit of continuous and along with some very there's not really done writing was not done very well. There's only been high praise for season 1 and 2.
Hmm.
And I would say the thing that would probably be better was if there was a story consistent with Hellgirl, and maybe we see more opening to like the supernatural world that's around Hellgirl as well.
It's a tricky line and to really like find that balance between like real like deep philosophical like occult like nature. Yet still trying to keep you know trying to keep people engaged without going like, oh man, oh this is not really, this is, I need to step away. Like that was certainly something for us. It's something that we had to deal with. I mean, it's a good show. Good show. We definitely did enjoy the show to an extent. To an extent, and there were definitely some areas where it had a little bit of levity in it. Like all grim aside, there was definitely some moments that as I had a little bit of levity in it. Specifically, the three companions, and is that we're following Hellgirl, which they would 100% be me and the SpongeBob's, the three of us if we were ever casting out roles.
Yeah, I really do love them. They actually put more into their backstory in season 2 as to what where they came from and how Hellgirl ended up meeting them and they decided to follow her.
Yeah, I'm curious, Priscilla, and I'll let you have the final thought on this. How do you find like the balance of like dealing with like these heavy like philosophical stories and like very big like more like moral like occupancies and isn't saying that wrong, but I don't wrong, but I know the other word for it, while still trying to have a little bit like stylism and levity in there, levity in there. Like, how do you find the balance in that, or do you even feel like there even needs to be a balance? Particularly talking about shows like this.
Um, I wouldn't say that there needs to be a balance. I would say it depends on what the intentions of it. What are you trying to tell? Because I know some people can mistake that Hellgirl is supposed to be like a type of leeway, but really it's more of a cautionary as to like why you shouldn't seek this path. And it's also like based on like the beliefs, especially with Confucius, which is a popular philosopher in Eastern countries, where he states that if you seek revenge, prepare to dig two holes, which is like one for your target, the other one for yourself. And I've
Mm,
seen like a lot of similar things with religion where if you judge someone, if you condemn them, you have to condemn yourself as well.
yeah, it's that golden rule of do you know what is the price you're willing to pay, hey, to get what you want. I don't know if that's a golden rule. I don't know if that's a golden rule, but that's just a very popular saying.
Yeah, it's like showing like this judgment of us, especially as humans. There's always going to be a price whether we're seeking it or not, and there's always going to be some type of condemnation to ourselves for it. Because if we just judge people and not hold each other for these same standards, or even like knowing that if you are you fine with condemning someone, what if you feel like what if someone condemned you?
Oof. And that is the $1 million question, and is what we're gonna leave you, and what we're gonna leave you, the audience, to think about as we wrap up this podcast. Priscilla, an absolute pleasure to talk about you. This will definitely put us to the test, as I'm very honored that you were here and that you were here to talk about this with us. Where can the people online find you if they want to know more about the stuff you're working on? And do you have any socials? I was like, where can people on the internet find you if they want to learn more about Priscilla?
Well, I do have an Instagram that I haven't really posted much, but I'm thinking about boosting it back up. And it is my Instagram is at Media Bunny at BU what B Media Bunny what Bunny as BUNI on
Mm.
Instagram.
All right. There you have it, folks. There you have it, folks. Bonnie, not the animal, not the animal. B U N I. On Instagram, and of course, Instagram and Hellgirl. Hellgirl is available on, I believe, Amazon Prime and Crunchyroll, or the latest season, and on Crunchyroll and Amazon Prime. It's not, not as similar to like the last seasons. But if you want just like a taste of what Hellgirl is, as you can check it out on there. And of course, as you're liking this podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and every podcast and wherever you get your podcast from. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. I know if you're liking some more of our own animation, you should, uh, not to the extent and of like big more quantities or whatever, but just like Goofy Boys, and boys, you can check that out on our YouTube. For our guest Priscilla, for my cohorts, my followers, SpongeBob and SpongeBob and SquarePants. I am Barney the Dinosaur, and no way am I saying I'm Hellgirl, but I like to believe what I like to believe. Yeah, Uh, and we will see you next time. And be sure to put your toys away when we're done with them. We'll see you next time on Talking Tunes with Toys.
All right, see ya.